What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Frankie D'Astoli Show. I am your host, Frankie D'Astoli. As always, I'm excited to have you guys here. I'm not going to lie, a little bit of a heavy heart to start this episode. If you guys haven't heard, there was a massive plane crash right above Washington, D.C., where a helicopter flew into a plane, and it's devastating. And it's truly a nightmare scenario. Like from someone who used to travel a ton and would be on a plane, 3, 4 times a month at least, going from, state to state, teaching reps how to wholesale real estate. That is a fear of mine. Every time I was on a plane, I was not a guy that liked turbulence for sure. And just hearing that is really, really sick. It's devastating. And, heart goes out to all those families, all those people that are affected by this. And they're saying there's no survivors. And I just can't even, begin to bear and imagine that of a helicopter flying into the airplane, splitting it in half and it going into the river. It's just really, really sad. And I'd like to start this episode off just by, offering up a Hail Mary for all of the victims on that plane and for their families. And I will encourage everybody, pray a rosary for those families. Pray a rosary for the souls of the people that have passed away, and pray for their souls in general. Just pray for their souls, because this is just as sad as it is a reminder. And we should all take this as a reminder that we always think these things won't happen to us. And then you hear stories like this and you realize that it can easily happen to you just as it happens to other people. And that was it. I mean, you hear the people on that plane. I mean, 2 of them were like Russian superstar figure skaters coming back with their coaches and their parents, and they're probably on cloud nine. They just won a figure skating competition or whatever the case is. And then boom, it's that fast. So let's offer up a Hail Mary in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Let's say St. Michael's prayer as well. St. Michael, the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly hosts, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Pray for those souls, and just take this as a reminder that it could happen, and it could happen very, very quickly. And this is not fun. These are not fun topics that I like to talk about on the Frankie D'Astoli Show, but they're real topics, and they need to be talked about. And we need to constantly be on the pursuit to perfect our souls and to unite ourselves with Christ, because you never know when these things can happen. And when they do happen, they need to serve as a reminder, and we need to do our part with praying for everybody's soul and praying, for all positivity to continue to come out of this suffering. So on that note, I actually had to stop at my church today because my wife, Christina, prior to being a stay-at-home mom and a homemaker, she was actually a ballet dancer and ballet instructor. And that's what happened when we were dating. She was a ballet instructor at a school in Pennsylvania, which actually was in New Jersey at the time, but they had a massive flood and had to relocate to Pennsylvania. So she was a ballet dancer, a ballet instructor from when we were dating, even up until when we were engaged, until we were married, until Bernadette was born. And now she is, in my opinion, the most important job in the world, which is a stay-at-home mom. Being a stay-at-home mom is definitely something that nowadays is underrated. Nowadays is not something that society promotes and really allows you to do. They pretty much are almost like holding everybody to this fact of everyone needs to go work, and we are in this productive world of if you're not working, you're actually like nothing. And my wife being home all day with Bernadette, and at this point, almost a little further out than a month, it's going to be my son too, God willing, everything goes smoothly. Is the greatest gift. It is the absolute greatest gift, and I say this. And maybe I'm in the minority nowadays, but as a husband, it should be your job for your wife to be a stay-at-home mom. And that doesn't mean that it's a degrading position. It doesn't mean that you're better than them. It's just, it is the optimal formation for a household, for the husband to be out, to be working, to be providing for the family that God entrusted him with, and then for the mother to be home, to be nurturing. Those are these kind of natural abilities that we were gifted with from God, is the mother is the nurturer, right? And I've said this on a previous show. It's like when the baby's born, the baby doesn't come out and say, I want daddy, or, says, I don't want daddy because his beard is scruffy. They are ultimately just attracted to the mother. There's that nurturing feeling. There's that bond from the very, very beginning. The mom has brought this baby into the world. The mother's carried this baby for 9 months. And we live in a world now where the mom delivers the baby, and then she's got maternity leave or whatever it is, and they're home for a few weeks or a few months at tops, and then have to go back to work. And you leave your kids with, at best case scenario, other family members, but in some cases, it's not even that. In some cases, you're hiring someone you don't even know to watch your children. And I think that is one of the biggest problems in society nowadays. So all that to say, I know I just went off on a total tangent there, but this is just, I feel very strongly about this. My wife, Christina, was a former ballet dancer and ballet instructor. And her boss, unfortunately, his mother passed away. So I ended up going to our church to get a mass card. We offer up a mass for his mom that passed away. The mass is offered up for her. So I went to go get this mass card. And of course, I get there at like 12:05. And the rectory, the place where you go to get the mass card, is closed. They're on lunch from 12 to 12:30. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'll just go into Adoration Hour for 20 minutes while I wait. And my church is awesome, and I highly suggest you find a Roman Catholic church that has a lot of Adoration Hour options, a lot of confession options, things along those lines. So I go into Adoration Hour and I go pray a rosary. And there's this guy in there. And anytime I go in Adoration Hour at St. Peter's, I mean, there's devout people in there. I mean, you got women wearing veils, you got, men on their knees, praying the rosary, doing a lot of devout things. And in Adoration Hour, just to give everybody some context, you have the Holy Eucharist at the front, elevated up. And the reason that is because Catholics, what we believe, or at least what we're supposed to believe, and I say that because unfortunately many of us do not anymore, is we believe that the Holy Eucharist is Jesus Christ, living, true, embodied. He is there. It is Jesus Christ. So when we go to Adoration Hour, we are in the presence of Jesus Christ through the Eucharist. When we go to Mass and we receive the Eucharist, we receive the body of Jesus Christ. And this is what Jesus says at the Last Supper. He says, this is my body. He doesn't say this is like my body. He says, this is my body, which will be given up for you, as he breaks bread with his apostles. And that is how the Mass is celebrated. And when you go to Adoration Hour, the Eucharist is there. So, and the reason why I say most people don't believe this anymore is because it's clear. It's 100% clear. As Catholics, and I heard this statistic a little while ago, and it's an extremely disturbing statistic. In 1950, about 75% of Catholics went to Mass every single Sunday. You know what it is now? 17%. Not 70, 17% now. That is a massive drop, almost 60%. And that just tells you how little Catholics believe in the Eucharist. Because if they believed that the Eucharist was the body of Jesus Christ, they would be at church every single day. Not just Sundays, they would be there every single day. And I admit, I'm not at daily Mass every single day, and I should be getting there more. But at the very, very least, they would be there on Sunday to receive the body of Jesus Christ. And they're not, clearly. 17%. There's almost a 60% delta there in a drop. That's a massive problem. So I'm in Adoration Hour in front of the Holy Eucharist, praying a rosary. And there's a guy in Adoration Hour. Like I've said, there's always devout people in there. Always, right? But this one guy, younger guy too, probably like, I would say like 20s, maybe 30s tops, maybe. He is in prostrate, right? So he's, and what that means is pretty much he's head down. He's kind of in more of like a seated back position. His head is down, but he is so aggressively praying, and he's crying as he's praying, and he's literally laying head down, lips on the marble in front of the Eucharist. And it was one of the most beautiful demonstrations of surrender that I've seen. And I don't know what he was going through. And I dedicated, a decade of my rosary to him for whatever he was going through. But it was just so captivating to see. And he wasn't doing it in a showing way. It was absolutely nothing like that. It was a way of, God, I'm here. I'm nothing. You are everything. You decide everything in my life. I give it to you. Please take whatever I am going through and make it good. Make it your own. Do with it as you will. And it was just so remarkable. It was remarkable to see, because I've seen devout people. And then there's been times where I have been, at least I felt very devout in the way that I prayed. But this guy was just he was in a different realm. He was in a different state. He was just so surrenderful. That's probably not even a word, but he just gave himself up in that adoration hour. And it was beautiful. And I just think about, whatever he was going through, I would imagine it's got to be intense, right? And the first thoughts we're going to have is his mom sick, or is a family member sick, right? If he's married, is his wife sick, or his kids are sick, things like that, things that would just eat me alive if that happened, right? And I just think about how a guy like that is in adoration hour at 12:05 on a Thursday, because it's the time I'm recording this, versus other people, how they would go to the bar and start drinking, or go do drugs, or go do things that they shouldn't be doing. And it's that difference of having God in your life versus not when things get tough. And that guy in there, I could tell things are tough for him right now, but he is giving himself to God. And as we talked about it, I dropped an episode on this, God our Father, understanding the Father's love for us. We see the love and the mercy that God bestows on us, and he gets it. That guy in adoration hour, he got it. He was there. He was giving himself up to God, and I pray for that man's as well. But it was beautiful adoration hour. I got a great rosary in, and then I went to pick up the mass card. So it's been an interesting remainder of this week. I didn't drop an episode on Wednesday this week because it's just been the end of the month. We have so much going on between a handful of refinances and a couple of properties closing. But I wanted to do this episode as a Q&A episode. So I'm recording this at the end of January, and I've accumulated, it's probably about like 10-ish questions here that have been sent to me throughout the month of January. And some of them I've already answered on my Instagram, Frankie D'Astoli _REI. I've already answered some of these on my Instagram story, or some of these were direct messages to me that I have answered as well. A few of them I haven't answered. I was collecting some questions solely for this episode. But you're going to get some of that. So you might have heard some of these, or you might have seen some of these on Instagram, but I'm going to go a little bit more in detail about some of these questions that we've had. And a majority of them, almost all of them, if not all of them, are actually real estate questions. So the remainder of this episode will be more so real estate focused. But I will be doing this every single month. At the end of every single month, I will be answering questions that were sent to me throughout the course of the month. I post usually every Friday on my Instagram to ask me questions. So if anybody is listening to the Frankie D'Astoli Show and you want to get a question answered, you could always DM me. I'm answering pretty much my DMs within an hour, as I mentioned on the show multiple times. Or on every Friday, I do put up, for the most part every Friday, I put up a Q&A session where you could ask me some questions. So I just gathered a few of the best here, and some of them I have some screenshotted on my phone, so I might have to revert to my phone a little bit, but I've kind of taken a handful and I've briefly written them down so that you guys we can kind of start breaking this down. So I'm going to get into the first one here. Let me get my book open here. So this first one comes from Austin in Philadelphia, and his question is, can I refinance a property prior to having a tenant move in? So my assumption here with this question, Austin, is you're probably doing a BRRRR, or you might have some sort of vacancy within your property. So usually when you refinance a property, if it's an investment property, if it's a rental, you're most likely going to refinance it into a loan called a debt service coverage ratio loan. In short, it's a DSCR loan. That might sound a little more common to some people. And the DSCR loan is a real estate investing engine loan. And the way that a DSCR loan is obtained is the lender is basing the loan off of the asset and the income that it's generating, right? So if your debt on the asset is, let's just say, $1,000 a month, right? Your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance is $1,000 a month, but you have a tenant paying $1,500, you have a 1.5 DSCR, a debt service coverage ratio. You're covering your debt 100% plus another 50% because $500 is that 50% over that 1,000. So that's what lenders will typically look at. However, all lenders are different. And this is something you guys need to understand. Every single lender out there looks at different requirements. They have different ways that they analyze deals. They have different things that will approve for lending to a particular borrower, all of that stuff. So I have refinanced BRRRR deals without even having a tenant in there yet and renting it out. And in my experience, again, you got to find that lender. It's worked out great. In some cases, they have charged me a little bit higher of an interest rate because of the fact that it's not already tenant occupied. So you just got to know which lender to go through. And if you need any recommendations on lenders, depending on your area, you're Philadelphia, you're Northeast, so I definitely have lenders for you over there. You could shoot me a DM at Frankie D'Astoli _REI. But short answer to that is no, you do not need to have a tenant in your house to refinance it. If you're going to refinance into a DSCR loan, it just depends on the lender that you're getting, and you got to make sure that your lender is okay with that. So great question, Austin. I appreciate it. I'm going to go to this next one here. I want to start investing in real estate. Any tips? This is from Altoff in Indiana. And I had a great conversation with Altoff. So I think really number one is you guys got to understand if you're going to start investing in real estate and you're not already doing it, you got to understand what your goals are, right? That's like the number one thing, because my goals are going to be different than your goals. Your goals are going to be different than, John Smith's goals, whatever the situation is. Everybody's got different goals. Are you in it for the long-term appreciation and wealth building? Are you in it to replace your W-2 income within the next year? Are you in it to, have kind of more of like a travel and relaxed lifestyle? Like, you have to know what your end goal is. And then, of course, breaking that down into smaller goals to start actually achieving things. But I think when you're kind of brand new to real estate investing, the first thing you want to do is you got to get educated, right? And like that comes with like anything. You want to go be a doctor, you go to medical school. You want to be a lawyer, you go to law school. Like the same thing applies with real estate investing. The only difference is you don't actually need to like go out and spend money on a degree. There's so many free, valuable assets around you, such as books. I highly recommend, obviously, Rich Dad Poor Dad, Cash Flow Quadrant. All the bigger pockets have great books. Ken McElroy is another one of my favorites. He's got the ABCs of real estate investing. It's just great books. There's so much of that. You also have podcasts like the Frankie D'Astoli Show, but other ones as well, right? Rich Dad Real Estate Show, the Real Estate Guys Radio, the Ken McElroy Show. Again, like I mentioned, Ken, Bigger Pockets, all of these things, all of these shows around you that you have just so much free education available. And then if you want to take it a step further, you could go to mentorships, right? Which I know someone has a question in here, so I'll kind of save a little bit of that. But I would suggest if you're brand new to real estate investing, get educated, understand what your goals are, and then make decisions towards those goals. Now, one thing I will say is from personal experience, if you are kind of in that like 18 to 26, 27-year-old range, you could probably even take that a little bit further age-wise. I would highly, but at least in that age range, I would highly, highly suggest house hacking and wholesaling. And there's two reasons why. By house hacking and wholesaling, you are furthering your real estate investing career, and you're also significantly increasing your education at the same exact time. And I think that's extremely, extremely valuable. Wholesaling, you do not need good credit. You do not need reserves. You really don't need much like real estate knowledge even too. I mean, to just use myself as an example, I started wholesaling real estate. I came from medical device sales. I knew nothing about real estate, like literally the bare minimum. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I went to one meetup group. Like that was it. Right. And I got into it. And within 6 months, I was doing over $100,000 a month in assignment fees. So you don't need to be significantly educated to get into wholesaling. However, you will become educated while you're wholesaling. And it's a really, really great way to get into real estate investing. And then house hacking is, in my opinion, one of the biggest cheat codes in real estate investing for two reasons. A, when you buy a house hack, and again, a house hack, just to give you guys kind of a breakdown, it's usually a multifamily, a 2 to 4 unit where you live in one unit and then you rent out the other units and you use that income to pay down your mortgage and to live hopefully for free, if not very, very close. And in some cases, if you do it really, really good and you get like a 4 unit, you could even cash flow off of it as you're living there. But house hacking is pretty much like investing on training wheels. When you buy a multifamily, or even if it's a single family and you're doing a rent by the room type aspect, that works as well. You get experience as a landlord. You understand, all right, how does this work when it comes to putting a lease agreement together? What does it mean to be, working with contractors and having draw payments and all of that stuff? How do I close a real estate deal? Do I have to work with an attorney? If so, how do I go about working with an attorney and finding an attorney? All of these kind of questions that you really don't even know all of a sudden kind of comprise themselves when you go and you actually close on your first house hack deal. And then if you do it really, really well, like I said, you can make money on it. You can live for free. You can live close for free. And you can even tap into the equity on the back end to buy your next real estate deal. And that's exactly how I did it. And that's how I got my start, was wholesaling and house hacking combination. So again, if you're in that 18 to 27, 28-year-old range, I highly, highly recommend it. You can do it anywhere. I got a buddy of mine who's 33 and he's getting into his first house hack right now. So like you can do it at any time, but that is personally my prescription. If you're looking to get into real estate investing, educate yourself. You can experience it with a mentor as well. But definitely, I would go wholesaling or house hacking to start, and then ultimately think about what some of your goals are and how you can make decisions to benefit those long-term goals. Great question. I got another question here. Great question from my boy in Indiana over there. All right, this one here is, what are some key fundamentals you put in your lease? And this is from my boy Aaron in South Africa. South Africa. So I just want to shout out all my international listeners on the Frankie D'Astoli Show. South Africa is on there. Sweden is on there. Italy is on there. Germany is on there. Russia's on there. Canada's on there. There's a handful more. I think United Kingdom there's definitely some sprinkles in there. So anybody that's international that's listening, I very, very much appreciate you guys. And this is a phenomenal question. Again, what are some key fundamentals that you put in your rental lease? So a few things. I'll kind of just think on this one for a second. You obviously want the obvious ones, right? Like what the rent payment is, all of that stuff. But what I do, a few things that I do a little bit differently in my leases, I put a $50 late charge if they don't pay by the 5th, right? So if rent's due on the 1st, which in most cases it is, usually it's either like the 1st or you're doing like the 15th. If rent's due on the 1st, if it's not paid by the end of the day on the 5th, so it's the 6th day, there's a $50 late fee. And then every day after that, it's an additional $10 leading up until the 10th. If the rent isn't paid on the 10th, on the 11th, it triggers an eviction. Now, this is the most ideal world to go about it, right? And being a landlord now of, I don't know, a dozen plus tenants, it's not always that clear cut, right? Sometimes you have certain things that pop up. You try to install some payment plans, or you might take some ahead of time, or whatever the case might be. But that's how you want it written in the lease. Because number one, it emphasizes the importance of paying on time. And you got to understand that as a landlord, your job is to provide good quality housing. In return, your tenants pay the rent and they keep it clean and they obligate by the rules and regulations, which leads to my next point. Once you have that late charge stuff in there, you're also going to want to put another couple of things, right? You're going to want to put your rules and regulations into the lease, or at least attached when you send the lease. And the rules and regulations thing is actually really flexible with you. You might need some things that are specific to your state, at least in my experience. But for the most part, it's relatively flexible. So you can make your own rules, right? And some basic rules are no smoking, right? You could have pet policies. You could say no trash on the porch, right? And it's funny, I'm talking about this and I'm thinking of one of my tenants as I'm saying all this stuff. Other things as well. You could really put anything into that portion of it. And I think that's really, really important. And you want to make sure you go into detail on that with your tenant when you onboard them. Another thing in your lease is really make sure you clearly categorize who's responsible for what utilities. This is a big one. I've had multiple tenants that, they think that I'm responsible for something, whether it's the electric or it's sewer or whatever the case might be. And then all of a sudden I start getting these bills that are coming to me and I'm like, why is my tenant not paying this? And they were under the impression that I was paying it. So you just want to avoid those situations. Make sure it's clear in the lease which, utilities are required for them to be paid. And always make sure before they move in that you check to make sure that they have actually switched those utilities into their name. That's really, really important. And I'll just kind of try to think on maybe one more thing here. Definitely the utilities, your rules and regulations, your rent amount. Make sure, this is a big one. This is definitely more on the legal side. Make sure anyone over the age of 18 signs on that lease, and definitely check your state laws on this stuff. But at least to my knowledge in, the USA, I think this is nationwide stuff, but make sure anyone over 18 signs on that lease. That's really, really important, because if you need to go file for an eviction, you have to have all those people that are on the lease. You need to hold all of them accountable. So that's really important. Great question. If you're looking for a little bit more on that, Aaron, just feel free to DM me on Instagram, Frankie D'Astoli _REI. I will make sure to try to give you a little bit more information on that one. Let me just pull this back up here. Let's see. We're going to the next one. This one is from Nick in New Jersey. What was the most difficult part of starting in real estate? It's a little bit of a big question, honestly. I think one of the most difficult parts was just having a little bit of confidence at first, right? I think you're just kind of so hesitant a lot of the times that you're going to make a mistake. And what you actually need to realize is like mistakes are a positive. You need to make mistakes as a real estate investor. And in all honesty, guys, you should make mistakes quickly, because the faster that you make mistakes, the faster you're going to be able to recover, the faster you're going to be able to make adjustments, the faster you're going to be able to understand what that mistake was and the lesson that you could pull from it. And then you're just going to end up in the position that you need to go a lot quicker. And I really just suggest that. I suggest getting in, making mistakes. Now, that doesn't mean go out and take stupid risks, right? That doesn't mean like, I got $10,000. I'm going to go buy a house in a state that I know nothing about, and I'm going to see what happens, right? I'm going to go put a down payment down. Don't do that type of stuff, but don't be afraid to get in there and to take some, some well thought out and, planned risks, because you need to do that and you need to make mistakes, and that's going to help you get in there, right? And I think that ultimately, when I think back on my time, I think that was a little bit it, especially when I first started wholesaling. I was so afraid of getting a bad deal. I was so afraid of getting a deal under contract that I couldn't dispo, that I couldn't move to an investor. And I remember when I was starting with my old wholesale outfit, I was in it for, about like 6 months at this time. And I was doing like really, really well. Like, we had our whole office doing over, 6 figures for like the past 2 months. And the CEO, the chief acquisition officer and the chief operations officer called me out. They flew me out actually to Nashville, and they sat down with me. And at that point, they promoted me to be the office director. At that time, I was the field rep. They promoted me to be the office director, but they also pointed something out to me. They said, all of your spreads are for like $25,000, $30,000. And they were like, that's actually not a good thing. Like, that shows me that you're not taking enough risk on these other deals. And when I looked back on it, I probably left like another $100,000 on the table, because I wasn't taking that risk, right? And even at that point where I was kind of in real estate investing, I wasn't taking that risk. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. Just do everything you possibly can to set yourself up for success and to learn from those mistakes and move forward. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that in regards to what was more of the most difficult part. I think after that, I'd probably say it was like lending, and more so just like after I bought my first house hack, just getting that next house. That was probably the hardest part. And at this point, when I look back on it, what I realized is I kind of was looking at deals from one lens. I was looking at them strictly like, how could I buy this house with a 20% down, payment, and, buy it with, or some sort of hard money loan. And now that I'm a little bit more seasoned in that sense, I kind of, every time I look at a deal, I try to find like 3 different ways that I could buy that deal. And what I've realized is if I'm looking at a deal and I could find 3 different ways, right? I could do it straight up. I could do it in some sort of creative way, or, I could partner with somebody, or whatever the case might be. But if I knew what I knew now back then, I would have overcome that hurdle a lot faster. I wouldn't have kind of felt handcuffed to the fact that I didn't have enough for a 20% down payment on another house, because I already used my 3.5% down for my FHA on my primary. And I kind of would have just bridged that gap a little bit more. So, and I think that all kind of rolls with education, in some senses, getting with the right people, putting yourself in the right rooms. But I would say, kind of getting past that lending hurdle and understanding how to really analyze deals and how to get creative with it was a little bit more of that obstacle in the way as well. Let's see. I'm going to move around a little bit here. All right. Another one from my boy in New Jersey, Osman. How would you finance your second house hack if your first one is affecting your DTI? Okay, this is a good question. So DTI is debt to income ratio. So pretty much when I go buy a car, let's just say, and I have a $500, payment on my car or whatever it might be, that directly affects my debt to income ratio. If I make $1,000 and I have, let's just say all things are equal, I make $1,000 and I have this car payment that's $500, I have a 50% debt to income ratio, right? 50% of my pay, that $1,000, has to go towards debt that I owe. That's how you measure debt to income ratio. So when you buy a property in your personal name, it goes directly against your debt to income ratio because you're carrying that mortgage, right? So if your mortgage is $2,000, that $2,000 is now included in your debt, and that kind of pops up on your debt to income ratio. And banks look at that, especially those conventional loan banks, right? Wells Fargo, Chase, those types of guys. They're looking at your debt to income ratio, and they're looking at it pretty in depth. So when you have a house hack in your personal name, which when you buy an FHA loan, you're going to have it in your personal name, at least at first, you are significantly, not significantly, you're directly affecting your DTI, your debt to income ratio. So how do you overcome this, right? Well, I actually just went through this, probably at this point, it's been almost a year, probably about 9 months ago. I had my first house hack and I was going to buy my next primary house, which I was putting in my personal name. So because the bank was running it in my personal name, they saw my debt to income ratio with my prior house hack. The fix for this is you need to get your house hack rented out, right? So I'll use my house hack as an example. I was carrying a $2,173 mortgage, something along those lines, and I had a top floor tenant, excuse me, who was in a 1 bedroom, and she was paying 1075 at that time. Ever since then, she's gone up at least I think about $100 or whatever it's been. But she was paying 1075 at that time. So really, I was able to show that as income towards me. So I really pretty much at that point was just having about $1,000 mortgage payment, which is what I paid when I was house hacking. My wife and I, when we lived in the house. So when I was going to buy that new house, that $1,000, however, was significantly affecting my DTI. So I had to get a lease in place and a first month's in the security deposit on my property in order to use that against my DTI. And now I could actually count that as income. So I rented out my unit in my house hack for $2,500 a month. I had a lease, I had first months, I had security deposit. I showed that to the bank. And because of that, now I don't even have any effect on my DTI. It's actually increased my income, which has positively affected my debt to income ratio. So if you're in a house hack right now and you're thinking about going and buying another property in your personal name, you're going to want to. Now, you might be in a situation where it doesn't even affect your DTI enough that it's going to affect you buying the next house. But if it does, you're going to want to get a tenant in that house hack so that you could show that that's going to be proof of rental income, which goes directly towards your income column in your debt to income ratio. Great question. All right, I'm going to go to, let's see, my boy Max in Washington State. He sent me a DM. I'm reading this one off my phone, but I'm just going to get right into this next portion here. He said, we have been in a very interesting situation recently. I have a paid off 2-bedroom house in a nice area that I completely remodeled, as well as a second home that's another 2-bedroom house that I just remodeled. We had it listed to sell, but now we're going back on the thought of renting it out. With both houses together, we could get around $1,000 after the mortgages on this on the second house is paid. I'm just curious if we should sell the first house and net around $250,000 or keep it. Okay, so it's a good question, right? And this is directly related to opportunity cost, right? And the definition of opportunity cost on a business perspective is, if I go do A, what did I miss on option B, right? If I go buy option A, what did I miss that was option B that I didn't buy, right? And whenever you're making a business decision, whenever I make business decisions within D&D, with whatever it is, I always think about, okay, if I do this, what can I not do? And if I do that, what did I leave behind, right? And I'll give you an example. Like, for instance, for my boy Max that asked this question, if you sell that house and you make $250,000, what are you investing that in? What's your next step, right? Because what you're telling me is, if you rent out both of those 2 bedrooms, you're going to net about $1,000 per month from those 2 houses. 500 and 500, I assume, is what it's going to be. So you're going to net about $1,000. What would be more beneficial to you? Getting that $1,000 every month consistently, or selling it, taking that $250,000 and going out and doing something else? You need to know what you're going to do next. Because if you're just selling it to take the 250, that could be good, or it could be bad, right? It could be bad because it might, stunt your generational wealth. It might stunt the cash flow that's coming to you. It might feel really good right now, but if you don't have a plan with it, that 250 could end up going into another investment that doesn't generate the same return that you're getting on your current 2-bedroom properties, right? So again, everything's a trade-off. You got to know, if I'm going to make this decision, what's the outcome of that decision, and what am I leaving in the dust, right? So that's really what you want to understand. You want to understand, what's my long-term goals? What's my short-term goals? If I sell this house, what am I going to do with that money? If I don't and I keep them and I'm generating this money from my rental tenants, how am I going to utilize the cash flow that I'm getting as well? So again, a lot of it aligns with goals. A lot of it aligns with your vision. Great question. Let's see. All right. Zafira in New York said, can I wholesale in New York? This is a very good question. I don't necessarily know where in New York you are, but the answer to that doesn't change, because you can wholesale anywhere. You truly, truly, truly can wholesale anywhere. And in my experience with wholesaling, which has been about 4 years now of wholesaling, there are just different markets for wholesaling, right? There's different economic feels in a sense. You could be in a market for wholesaling, for real estate investing as a whole, that it is very, very hard to find a deal. But when you find that deal, it sells like hotcakes, right? Like there's no pressure on the dispo side to get a deal done. If you get a contract, you get a property under contract, you will assign the rights to that contract so fast because that market is so hot and it's really hard to come about deals. The pro there is the dispo side. You're going to have a very, very easy transaction for the most part with your investors on the back end. The con is getting that deal, right? It's going to take a lot of legwork. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of brute force and grit and tenacity and fortitude to get that deal. And that's a little bit of a trade-off. You might have to invest some money on the front end. You might have to do a few direct mail campaigns, or you might have to blast out, 20,000 texts a month, whatever the case might be. And you might have to spend some money. And as you're spending money, that expense column is going up and that income column at that point isn't going up yet. But once you get that deal, boom, then that income column shoots up, right? That's a little bit of that trade-off in that type of market. Whereas the other types of markets could be where the acquisition side is really easy, right? You might only have to send out a couple of thousand texts every month, or you might be able to just do everything organically, and you find yourself getting 3 deals a month, 4 deals a month. But the dispo side of it, finding the investor on the back end is what's challenging because there's not a lot of buyers in that area and there's a lot of volume, right? Which makes, the supply a lot higher and the demand a lot lower. So you might have a good amount of contracts coming in, but you might not be able to do much with those contracts. And ultimately your income column, boom, isn't shooting up that much either. So no matter what market you're in, you can wholesale. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, I will say there are some legal things that are coming out where you might need a real estate license to wholesale in certain states. I highly recommend everybody looks into that so and you're fully educated, you're operating everything legally. But from a perspective of just effort and being able to actually accomplish the task, yes, you can wholesale anywhere. New York, whether that's New York City, whether that's Buffalo, whether that's Albany, wherever it possibly is within New York, I promise you can wholesale. It's just a matter of what your market demands and what the price needs to be paid in order to actually acquire deals and accomplish them and get them closed. Good question. Appreciate you coming in. All right, I got one. I'm going to go to the phone on this one too. This is from my boy Josh in Trinidad, Caribbean. Absolutely phenomenal. He says, I'm trying to buy my first property, but I'm not able to get a loan from my local bank due to not being permanent at my job. What can I do? Excuse me. And if I were to reach out to an investor, how can I pay them back without the bank? Thank you for your time. So first things first, you got to understand what kind of property you're buying, right? If you're buying a primary home, you're going to most likely need to go through some sort of conventional bank, right? Unless you're doing some sort of creative financing. And you see some, really stud guys out there that are buying houses with $1 out of pocket and they're buying these like mansions. And it's absolutely possible, right? Creative finance is insane. I'm going to have a buddy of mine who's a king of creative finance come on the show soon to talk a little bit more about that. But you got to understand what property you're buying. That's number one. If you're buying a primary, you're most likely going to have to go through some of those conventional banks. Like I said, Wells Fargo, Chase, those types of guys, Freedom. But if you're buying a real estate investment, you don't want to necessarily go with those conventional banks. Right now, it's not impossible. You could go with the 20% down conventional loan on a real estate deal. But for the most part, you're going to want to bring those deals to hard money lenders or to private money lenders. And hard money lenders, they don't. So again, some of them are different. Some of them look at different things, but for the most part, the general masses of them don't look at necessarily you so much. They simply look at the deal. They want to know, what are you buying the deal for? How much work are you putting into it? What is it worth on the back end? How quickly can I get my money back, right? Like that's what they're really kind of thinking about in their mind. That's what they're driving with. And in some cases, they'll look at your credit score. In some cases, they might want to see your W-2. They might want to see some sort of income. So every lender is going to be different. I've had some lenders that base the leverage, right? How much money they're willing to lend to me off of my credit score, where others don't base that at all. They're simply basing it off of the ratio that I have the deal in regards to the after repair value. So all these lenders are different. I would suggest finding hard money lenders. And when I got this question, I actually sent I sent Josh some stuff on some lenders in the Caribbean. I'm not from there, so I don't really know. So I told him definitely do your own due diligence on that. But at the end of the day, talk to some of these guys, talk to these hard money lenders, talk to these private money lenders, talk to these guys that are investing with the investors on these real estate deals. And as long as you're not buying a primary home, you're going to have a good chance of working with those guys. And you're at least going to know what the formula is that they're looking for. So that way you could go and execute on it, and you could do whatever you need to do to get that type of lending. Let me see. I'm going to try to do maybe like one more here. Let me see. All right. I'm going to do this one as the last one. My boy Chris in Philly. Do you think it's valuable to have a mentor? So, yes. Uh, Bottom line, yeah. Like, I mean, I have two real estate mentors. I talk to my mentors at least once a week, at least. And at this point, I'm again, like I'm pretty seasoned. I have over 20 rental properties, and I've wholesaled for the past 4 years. And I still talk to my lender, my mentors at least once a week. I talk to my lender probably every single day, but I talk to my mentors at least once a week. And it's extremely valuable because they've been there, right? For the most part, especially if they're in the lane that you're in. Right now, listen, if your mentor's in, long-term rentals and you're trying to do short-term rentals, they might be able to still help you on some of the general real estate things. But when it comes to returns on short-term rentals, they're probably not going to be your best person to talk to. But at the end of the day, like, they've been there, they've done it. They could give you guidance, right? And I think this all rolls with, like, why do we read books? We read books to learn things, right? And why do we learn things? To avoid mistakes, to be able to execute, to be able to actually accomplish the things that we set out to accomplish. So it's the same thing with a mentor. And a mentor is significantly more valuable than most books that you're going to read, because it's someone there to bounce ideas off of. It's someone there to tell you, hey, Frankie, this is a botch. You need to jump out of this. You need to get into your other lane, or you need to, reset. You need to do whatever it is. Or, hey, man, I think this is a really, really good idea. You should definitely move forward with this. And like I said, it is really, really valuable. And I've mentioned this before, but usually when it comes to mentors, there's two ways to go about getting them. Number one is you could seek to serve, right? And I've had a few people reach out to me on Instagram, and I'm very appreciative of it, of people just kind of saying like, hey, is there anywhere that, I could be plugged into your business just so I could learn? And that's a great thing. And you guys should absolutely be reaching out to investors that you look up to try to be that person, right? To try to be that. And even with my mentor, like one of my mentors, it's a total seek to serve relationship. Like, I help him find deals, and he does flips, he does ground up construction, he does all of that stuff that eventually I want to get into that ground up game, and I learn a ton from him. He's got a bunch of rentals. He's taught me so much in regards to that. And I've helped him with just some, acquiring some deals and just being there and helping him with some other aspects as well. So it's a great kind of back and forth. I think he's definitely given me more than I've ever given him, for sure. But still, it's that relationship. And then the second is the pay to play, right? And that's like, you pay for a mentorship program. And I'm a mentor. I have multiple apprentices in my mentorship program that have paid to play. And I take that as a mentor extremely seriously, right? People are giving me their money, and in return, I need to give them my time, my energy, my effort. I need to put them on the right path. I need them to succeed, because at the end of the day, that is how I succeed as a mentor, is when my apprentices succeed as well. So that is also a great way to go about it. But I will say this, when it comes to mentorships, especially when you're buying into them, a lot of it is on the mentor to deliver the best quality work and the best quality, information, and to be there for you. Like, that is absolutely on the mentor. But on the mentee, on the apprentice, it is absolutely on you to show up and to take the mentor's advice and actually execute on it. Because as much as I could tell you as a mentor, like, hey, you need to do 1, 2, and 3, if you don't do it, no matter how good of a mentor I am, I can't make you a real estate investor, right? So that's something that you want to keep in mind. But in a nutshell, mentors are, in a lot of cases, like the piece that gets you to be where you want to be. And you hear it all the time. People are just like, I don't want to pay somebody. I don't want to pay somebody. But at the end of the day, they don't think about it as paying somebody. Think about it as investing in yourself. Like, that's what you're doing. Just the same as when you go to college to get a degree. Why do you go to college to get a degree? You go to college to get a degree, to get a job, right? Why do you go to a mentor? You go to a mentor to get education, to go do what you want to do, to go be a real estate investor, to seek, exactly what you're looking for on that journey. So I highly recommend mentorship, as long as it's within your realm. And I think also you need to be ready for it. If you're not, like, in a position where you're ready to execute, on deals where you're ready to really kind of like push the needle and jump into that next level or that next realm of real estate investing, it might not necessarily be the right time. You might just necessarily want to say, hey, I'm gonna enjoy all the free resources that are around me, the books, the podcasts, the DMs, all of that stuff. And really kind of just focus there. But once you're really ready to move and start taking serious action, that's when I definitely recommend you bring in a mentor that's going to help guide you on your path. So great show. Keep sending questions, guys. Every single month, I am going to be doing the end of the month question and answers. And this is all based off your questions. Every single one of these were ones that were sent in. So please continue to send in questions. If you have any, DM me, Frankie D'Astoli _REI on Instagram. I'm answering any and all DMs, and I will be using some of those questions on the Q&A shows as well. Pray the rosary. Pray the rosary, buy real estate, guys. Pray the rosary, especially for those victims in the plane crash. But pray the rosary for yourself and for your family, and meditate on those mysteries and grow closer to Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, and to our Blessed Mother Mary. And what I will say is, if you guys are enjoying the show, it's been an amazing month of January. We've significantly increased in downloads and in views in January compared to December when I launched the show. So I really am appreciative statistically. I'm appreciative of all my USA listeners and all my international listeners. You guys are why I keep getting on the mic. So I appreciate you guys. And if you wouldn't mind, I will ask you to please rate the show. Please review the show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on any of your podcasting platforms. And please, please, please subscribe to the YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. I post all of the videos on the YouTube channel. If you're more of a visual guy or girl like I am, I like to see kind of who's talking. I post everything on the YouTube. So please subscribe, please like, please rate, please follow, please do all the works. And I really, really appreciate it. It's been an absolutely amazing January. Looking forward to getting into February, and I'm looking forward to fielding more of your questions and answering them. Thanks, guys. Peace out.